be queer is to be misunderstood by most of society. We live in a gendered, heteronormative, binary world that typically takes a look at a person and makes some assumptions about them. And for queer people, those assumptions are more often than not wrong. It would be incredible if we lived in a world where we could look at each other person as just a person and not make assumptions about their gender, their sexuality, their identity. But that's not the world we live in. So for queer people, we have to make the choice between taking up space and being open and vocal about our identities, or existing within that world and being misgendered or mislabeled. Last year, I made the choice to take up space, to be vocal about my identity, and I've slowly started to integrate that more and more into how I present myself. But in that journey, there have been a lot of experiences I didn't expect. So let's talk about the surprises of coming out as queer. So for one, I didn't expect how much coming out would be a starting point rather than the end destination. So much of my journey to figuring out my identity was about figuring out what I actually was, how I actually felt about myself, and making sense of all these puzzle pieces in my brain that just didn't seem to fit. So when I finally came to terms with being queer and non-binary, those puzzle pieces all clicked into place in my brain. But a big part of coming out was coming to terms with the fact that I can't control my entire future. I can't know everything about where I'm going. It was letting go of the future that I had envisioned for myself, the career path I had envisioned for myself, to take a step into the unknown. So once I came out, that was the start of the journey. And then the rest of the journey was how I referred to myself, how I acted, how I presented myself, how I related to other people. I also didn't expect to have to come out so frequently. I expected to talk about it with my wife and with my family and like the people closest to me, but I didn't expect that I would have to decide with every new person or new group I was a part of how much of myself I was going to share. I didn't expect to have to decide to walk in a room full of people I've never met before and decide if I lead with the fact that my pronouns are they, them, or if that's just going to make the vibes weird and I should only address it if it comes up, but then I'm going to get misgendered the entire time. It's a constant decision of, do I want to come out? Do I want to take that step with someone new, potentially have to explain myself a little bit, or do I just leave it at getting misgendered? Also, just didn't expect this to take up so much of my headspace all the time. Again, I thought coming out was kind of the decision, like I would feel relieved, I would feel like myself, but now there are just so many little decisions to make. Ever since the moment of coming out, the dysphoria or gender euphoria is always there. Not a day goes by where like gender is not a significant amount of what I think about that day. And maybe it's because I'm still pretty early in my journey, but it's just something that takes up so much headspace, which is why I feel so drawn to constantly talking about it and creating about it, because it is such a journey of personal discovery. But probably the hardest part for me as an introvert, as someone who likes to put themselves second, was that I didn't expect to have to take up space for myself. Being queer is not easy, and it goes against what society and what most people expect, which means if I'm going to be seen for who I authentically am, I have to fight to take up space. I have to learn when to advocate for myself. Like, do I want to celebrate Father's Day? And making the decision instead to celebrate International Parents' Day, which is on a completely different day. I have to decide, like, what does my daughter call me? How does she refer to me? And that was a tough decision to start. I have to decide to shop in the women's section at the thrift store, which for a while was hard and a little bit scary. Like going up next to old ladies and going through the racks was not the easiest experience. And all of those experiences are totally fair and valid because all of these people live in a binary gender construct. But the other place that I've had to fight to take up space is within the queer community itself. Because even though being queer is weird and can be so different from what people expect, we've also built these labels and expectations for certain people. And as a non-binary person who was born male, a lot of times I don't fit those. The last time that happened was at a concert a few months ago, and I decided not to get in the pit. Something about the fact that like only femme people were in the pit made me feel like I didn't belong. And so I decided to just leave that space for the people who decided to go in. And it happened again at a concert I went to a few weeks ago, and I decided to take up a little bit of space to like fight for the visibility of non-binary people who were born male. But within probably 10 seconds, somebody had pulled me out and kind of pushed me behind the row that was holding the pit open. And I don't hold any negativity toward that individual, but at the same time, I am frustrated by the standard within the queer community that excludes people like me. It is one thing to be profiled and misgendered by people who live within the binary and think within that heteronormative framework, but it's kind of almost a worse feeling to be profiled by people who are already living out of the binary. It's like I'm just a little bit too weird, a little bit too feminine to really fit into the heteronormative group, but at the same time feels like I'm not queer enough, like I'm not presenting myself as androgynous enough to be fully accepted by the queer community. And I did not expect that even after coming out, even after making changes to my appearance that align with my gender identity, that I would still inhabit that middle space, that purgatory between queer and cis. It's hard to make decisions that are authentically for me and how I feel most comfortable without feeling like I'm making them to be seen as more queer, because that's just not what this is about. But it hasn't all been hard either. I didn't expect for things to feel so right all the time since I've come out. Even when I get misgendered, even when I get profiled or people don't see me for who I am, I have this sense of just peace inside of knowing who I am in a way that I've truly never felt before, that makes all of those just not affect me at all. The fact that I understand for so long why I was uncomfortable with my body or with certain aspects of myself, and the fact that I now am able to recognize dysphoria and then make choices that make me feel good is such a wonderful thing that it does really outweigh all of the negative, all of the hard parts. Even if no one in the world, except like my wife, ever gendered me correctly or ever saw me for who I am, I would be okay with that, because regardless of how other people see me and their opinions, being myself, admitting to myself who I am, just feels so right as I go about my days that none of that other stuff really matters. I also didn't really expect that I would want to be so vocal about my identity for a long time, like because I was okay getting misgendered while I was still figuring things out. But feeling that rightness, that peace when I came out, combined with the political climate, which continues to marginalize and villainize people who are queer, people who are trans, it has made me want to use my identity to speak up. I want to fight to take up space, not just for me, not just for my own peace, but also for the safety and the representation of people who are in the community who are being marginalized. And so even though it's so hard for me to take up space as somebody who is so used to putting others first, it feels like the right thing to do. I've just wanted to be a vocal part of the community, to show other people that they're safe, to show the world that queer people exist everywhere and can't be erased, and that you should never assume someone's identity just by looking at them. And as I've been learning to take up space and to be myself, both within my real life and online, I did not expect to get this much support. Like, despite getting misgendered by strangers, despite the occasional comment that says that non-binary identities aren't real or I'm just doing this for attention, most people who care about me and my life have been supportive. And all of that has been incredibly meaningful and honestly just mind-blowing to know that I can make such a big change to my identity and the way I see myself and ask other people to perceive me, and they will still love me and support me in that. And most importantly of all, I did not expect to have zero regrets. Even when it's hard, even when I'm facing low confidence, low self-esteem, there have been times where since coming out or since realizing my identity, I have questioned if I made the right decision. Like, I have questioned if this is truly the path I want to follow, if it's all worth it to keep fighting to take up space when so much of the world is going to misgender me anyway and make incorrect assumptions about me anyway. But the truth is, I have never once regretted coming out. I have never once regretted making the decision to live as myself, which maybe more than anything else validates my identity and dispels all those worries I had leading up to me coming out of whether this was the right decision, whether this was truly who I am. No matter how hard it gets, politically, in my personal life, just like the constant fight to take up space, to be valid, to be seen for my authentic existence, no matter how hard that gets, I have never regretted making that decision to start living as myself. This is me. I don't fit the gender binary. I don't fit any boxes. Like, non-binary is the best label I can kind of use to describe it, but I don't have a gender. I want to keep living that way, and I will never regret telling that to the world. And I didn't expect to feel that way.